Welcome back for another video. I'm Mehabad, a free-to-play endgame player in Raid Shadow Legends, and today is the day I've been putting off for a long time, and we're going to have a look at Bommal. I'm often asked for advice on Bommal. It's probably the Doom Tower boss that causes the most grief to the most number of players. Now, there are a few ways of tackling Bommal, and most popularly, these can be categorized into one of three variants. There's solo cheese, a no-buff sustain team, and high-resistance teams. The problem with solo cheese and no-buff teams is they're relatively champion-specific. Furthermore, I personally avoid cheese wherever possible, as I find it the least interesting way to play games. The no-buff compositions generally are also very champion-specific and rely on multiple copies of the same champion, typically multiple Vogos and or multiple Master Butchers. You can have a combination of the two of them, but the point is it's reliant on you having duplicate copies of very specific champions. So this leaves us with high resistance teams. Granted, these are the most gear intensive. However, I believe everyone can do them if they've been investing in faction wars to forge perception gear. This is pretty endgame content, hard Doom Tower, Bommal. So I would expect that most people watching this video have been playing for a while and therefore should have been farming faction wars to a reasonably high level for a period of time. In any case, perception gear is by far the easiest way to reach the speed, resistance and accuracy thresholds required to build a resistance team against Bommal. Perception sets with accuracy, speed and resistance substats are amazing, and really I cannot stress that enough. Furthermore, resistance chests and resistant banners are critical. If you just think about it, 6-piece perception is already 120 accuracy just in set bonuses. And if you've been developing your accuracy and resistance nodes in your Great Hall, which I personally think are the best value trees and are the two that I focused on and maxed out first, then this puts us at 80 resistance and 200 accuracy before any gear stats are taken into consideration. So it's really pushed us a long way towards those goals before we've even begun to worry about the quality of gear we've got to work with. I'm going to try and build a team based around a recent fusion into Tura, who in the fusion guide video, I cited that I thought he would be really good for Bommal, and I encouraged people to fuse him specifically for this boss. I'll bring in Mithrala, who we're all getting through Hydra. I'll bring in Rector Drath, a top tier quality epic, should be relatively more attainable, achievable champion. I'll bring in Underpriest Brogni, who is also a past fusion champion, and I will bring in one Vogoth. Now, it is possible to do it without Vogoth, and I have previously done Bommal without Vogoth, but it's definitely less consistent, more difficult, and you do need probably one or two real top tier champions to make it work on a consistent and comfortable basis. But in this particular composition, I would say every single champion that I'm showing in this run is interchangeable with others. There are swaps for every role. But before we worry about who we could swap in and what the alternates are, I think it's better to understand how the team is constructed and what mechanics we need for you to then be able to evaluate your own roster and form a team that might be able to replicate what we're going to do in this run. So you can see at the moment, we're just re-gearing to Tura as I didn't have enough resistance in the build to make it work on Bommal 90. So now that that's done, we can jump into the run. Now, since we've got our AI presets already configured, we can start this on full auto. We will jump in towards the end of the second wave and ensure that we cycle back to our abilities and we're able to enter the boss with all of our abilities off of cooldown. So let's have a little think about the team composition as we have it and why we've made the selections that we have. Rector Drath there is bringing us a resistance lead, which I think is critical for us to be able to build the champions in an efficient manner without having ridiculous gear requirements. So Rector herself brings a 55 resistance in all battles aura. But in addition to that, she has a nice passive, which puts 50 additional resistance on any champions under Veil or Perfect Veil. Since we have Tatura and Rector, we have two ways of getting Veil on ourselves. So that's additional mechanics that we have in our favor to bump up our resistance. Overall, what we're doing there is reducing the gearing requirement. And that's all it really is. So I would recommend a resistance lead. There are multiple champions that can bring a resistance aura, and we'll try and discuss that later in the run when we talk about swaps that are viable. So outside of bringing a resistance lead, what else are we focusing on? We also want ways to flat out mitigate damage. Bommal hits extremely hard himself, and the bombs themselves are effectively like a max enemy HP hit, and we cannot reduce the damage from those bombs through increased defense or through defense whatsoever, or through shields. It ignores defense and it ignores shields. So therefore, we must find other ways to mitigate the damage coming from those bombs. The best approaches that I have found are to run buffs such as Strengthen and Veil. Both of these flat out reduce the damage from the bombs by in Big Strengthen's case 25% and Veil's 15%. So these go a long way to reducing the damage taken. Furthermore, some champions have passive abilities that further reduce the damage being taken from various sources. In this instance, really, AoE sources of damage being reduced would work highly effectively. Geomancer has in his passive a way of reducing damage. Venomage has in his passive a way of reducing damage. Tyrant, and most famously of all, Duchess. So there are multiple champions that you could look at to bring ways of mitigating the damage. Failing damage mitigation, you've got to think of ways that we can transfer that damage into healing. In that instance, there's only really two champions that do this, Vogoth and Master Butcher, and Vogoth does it much better. And that is predominantly the reason we have him here. The healing burden from those bomb explosions is very high. So even though we're going to mitigate a lot of damage through Strengthen and Veil, we're also going to effectively mitigate even more damage through Vogoth's inbuilt passive to heal himself. So past that, all we really have left in this composition is healing, is some form of sustain. So in that instance, we have Rector bringing a big heal. We have Brogni effectively healing us from shield conversion. So although that won't work against the bombs, it will work against Bommal's direct hits. We have another form of healing coming from both Tatura and from Mithrala, as both of them can put out shields. So we have three champions that can put out shields in Brogni, Tatura, and Mithrala, by which Brogni will convert the shield into healing when Bommal attacks us. We have one primary healer in Rector Drath and a passive healer in Vogoth who will convert the bomb damage into heals. So now that we're on to the boss fight itself, essentially every time we know the boss is near to stripping our buffs, we need to make sure we put decrease accuracy out. In reality, I'd generally suggest you try and have decrease accuracy out at all times, because if you permanently keep decrease accuracy on the boss, you won't take any stuns, any HP burns, and you won't have your buff stripped. And therefore you won't have any bombs placed upon you. So it's much easier just to maintain decrease accuracy on the boss at all times and not have to try and finesse the timing of the decrease accuracy. In addition to that, we're going to keep an eye on the turn meter of the bombs, and when they're close to exploding, we will use the strengthen ability from Mithrala. So you can see that each time those bomb turn meters are nearing to be full, say around 75% to 80% full, that's when I'm timing my usage of her A3 to get that strengthen out. The shield she puts out won't protect us against the bomb, but again, via Brogni's passive, it will protect us if Bommal himself follows up after the bombs explode with another hit on our team. So beyond that, I mean, it's very much a rhythmic fight. I'm watching the cooldowns on the boss's abilities, keeping an eye on the debuff bar that I have on him, and keeping an eye on our own buffs. I'm timing my strengthen to coincide with when the bombs explode. And beyond that, I'm just cycling my abilities. I'm using my heal from Rector whenever it's off cooldown required. If I can get away with using either the A2 or the A3 from Tatura because decrease accuracy is on the boss already, then I'll take that opportunity to get those additional buffs out. With Brogni, I'm just going to use his abilities whenever they're off cooldown. Vogoth is only ever going to A1. The A2 is irrelevant against this boss. He can't provoke anything, therefore he can't get the decrease attack out. So, I mean, that's pretty much the extent of the fight. It is a fight of attrition. I don't have a recognized damage dealer. I don't have the accuracy in Brogni's build to get the HP burnout. If I did, it would be considerably quicker. But I am relying here on Mithrala to bring out the poisons via her A1, which I will use whenever possible to get additional damage out on the boss. So at least we have a form of boss killer there in Mithrala. And it works well. Like, yes, we do go low quite often, but we have enough mitigation and enough healing to sustain. You can see that we're not in any serious danger, that generally speaking, we have a good rotation, we have a good team composition. You know, we've got, 2 epics and 2 fusions and a free champion that you get through Hydra. I mean, this is probably the most budget traditional resistance style team that I could come up with that would work for Bommal 90. There are some additional champions that definitely work that you can also acquire free to play, shall we say, or kind of that would be budget viable or considered budget viable. Specifically, Lydia also brings us a strengthen, and Urost, in fact, has one of the best resistance leads and brings a strengthen and brings poisons on Bommal when Urost is hit. And in addition to all of that, brings ally protection, which is another way to massively reduce damage taken from those bombs and redirect it to one specific champion. It works well in the case of Urost because his passive builds his own HP pool to stratospheric levels. So it really does work well. The problem is I can't necessarily showcase all of these different mechanics because my Urost doesn't have resistance anymore. I did actually use Urost in my first ever clear of Bommal 90, and I can attest that it does work and it is a good mechanic to use. However, my Lydia has Evil Eye, so I can't even try to see whether it would work as I envisage it would. I mean, ultimately she has strengthened, so it should. But my personal preference for that position would be either Mithrala or Urost. I think they're the best two champions to bring us strengthen because they bring additional utility in terms of poisons or ally protection, etc. Urost as well has a massive resistance lead, which again just reduces the gearing requirements drastically. So I would definitely recommend looking at Urost if you haven't already. In terms of other decrease accuracy champions, when I first cleared this, I used Yoshi, but I wouldn't recommend him because his decrease accuracy, whilst it's on a short cooldown, is totally random. It says 2 hits at random, but it's one of those extremely random abilities that don't even hit the target that you are targeting. So it can end up not hitting Bommal and both of them going into one of the bombs or splitting across both the bombs, and you never end up with decreased accuracy on Bommal. And then anytime you miss decreased accuracy, it's an instant wipe. So it's so inconsistent. I would recommend against trying that. The only way I managed to make it work was to bring in Vizier. And Vizier is in fact an excellent champion for Bommal because you can bring in someone with a less consistent decrease accuracy, and Vizier will simply extend it. Vizier is also going to bring in a decrease attack and a block buff, so you can massively reduce the damage you're going to take from Bommal himself, even if not from the bombs. Other champions to consider would be Anax, also brings a decrease accuracy along with poisons, decreased defense, and weaken, so it can bring a lot of debuffs that can really help you in this fight. Another one would be Whirlim, brings an irresistible decrease accuracy along with strengthen, and a freeze on the A1, which is another way that you can damage mitigate from the bombs themselves. So overall, there's a lot of buffs that we can bring that will help us, and there's a lot of debuffs that we can bring that will help us. Specifically on the debuff side, decrease accuracy, decrease attack, block buffs. Those are the 3 big ones that we would like to have. And in terms of the buffs for ourselves, we want strengthen, we want veil, we would like some kind of passives that will reduce the damage coming back to us. And we need some form of healing. Now, shields have limited effectiveness, particularly if you're not bringing Brogni, so I wouldn't rely so much on those. But direct healing and continuous heals are very strong. So, this gives you some ideas about how you could build a team to overcome Bommal. But it is a hard fight, and it does require a strong composition and strong gearing throughout. So let's just kick back, put a bit of music on. You can watch the rest of this fight go over, it's like over and over in cycles. You have to stay focused because if you do make a mistake, it can cost you the whole fight. So you will see me be very deliberate, very methodical. I'll be very much taking a lot of care that I'm using the abilities at the right time. But as a result, we will get it done. And that's the important thing. When you're trying to progress, you don't necessarily want to get Bommal on farm. But obviously in the long run, it would be nice because I think the gear set is good. So anyway, like I said, I'll put a bit of music on and we'll come back once the fight's finished, and then we can take a look at the champion builds, and then I can show you kind of a couple of other teams that I use. And there we have it, Brobny finishing it off. So if we look at the overall summary of the fight, Rector doing huge healing there, 2.2 million. Mithrala bringing in a lot of damage. That's really coming from the poisons that ultimately were our way of killing the boss. Tatura bringing a bit of damage on the waves, helping us get through there, and also bringing, the decreased accuracy that was critical. Brobny also bringing some damage for us. I think the HP burn managed to go off a couple of times, and he also helped on the waves. And obviously Vogoth healing as well. So Mithrala here in Perception and Untouchable. You do not need to run Untouchable or Immunity. This is my arena build. I do have her in high effective HP, high speed, and then a high kind of cumulative resistance and accuracy. Like I said, you don't need to be hitting these stats at all, but this is my current Mithrala build for arena. The skills are booked out. The A2 and A3 you definitely need to get books into. In terms of masteries, mine is in an arena setup. Eagle Eye, very strong on Mithrala. And for me, I have Cycler Revenge because of the way I use her in arena. Again, not required for this content. Underpriest Brobny, actually forgot to even put a banner on him. Might have helped reach those accuracy levels that we could have actually used the HP burn if I'd actually put a banner on. Thereafter, high effective HP, and probably a little bit slower than I'd have liked, to be honest. The skills are booked out, and in terms of masteries, I went down to Giant Slayer. That's for use with his mechanic of reflect damage on the shield ability. Tatura I have in speed and 2 perception sets, hitting again that target for me on the resistance of around the 425 mark, enough accuracy to be landing the debuffs over 350, and enough speed to be going ahead of the boss, so above 250 speed. The skills are all fully booked out. The A1 is critical. Master Hexer, extremely important again as well, just to give you that additional comfort with the decreased accuracy. If I do finish the masteries, I will end up on Warmaster. And then Rector Drath in a Perception Speed and Divine Speed sets. Again, we're hitting that resistance mark around 425, high effective HP, and enough speed. Again, I'd actually probably rather her to be above 250. The skills are booked, and I have arena masteries with Unshakable as the tier 6. Vogoth, I've had loads of different Vogoth builds, but right now, Resistance, Immortal, and Fortitude. I am building him with enough resistance and enough accuracy to land that leech, which will help me on the sustain side of things. Doesn't need to be quick though, I have him pretty slow. It's all about the passive. The skills are booked, but you don't need it. It's all about that passive. Phenomenal. Like, what a champion. And in terms of masteries, I actually have mine down in an arena style build with Bulwark, but you could definitely go for many other different mastery choices. As a little bonus tip, you could even put him in a curing set and get even more healing coming back from that passive. He's a great candidate if you need him to progress through Bommal to have in a curing set. So that's it for the champion builds. I mean, I have really sped through the champion builds themselves because the video is getting pretty long, and I spent most of the time really trying to discuss the mechanics of Bommal and how and why I've chosen the champion composition that I have. You can always come back and scan through the stats that I have and the gearing that I have and adapt that to your own builds. The key things to think about is the ultimately with Aura Lead and with masteries and passives, you need over 500 resistance and you need a few champions above 250 speed. So anyone still watching, I have to say thank you. I mean, you've lasted this long. Why not last a few more minutes? I'm now going to show you the team that I'm running to farm Bommal at the moment, which is pretty much 100%. It's not fully 100%, but it's pretty high. Like it's probably around 90% consistency. And it works pretty well for me. I don't have to mess around with the builds too much. They're pretty much the builds I would use them in other content anyway. So it works out quite nicely. I've got my Arena Duchess, my Arena Candrathon, and then the other 3 champions are kind of built really just for this boss. I don't tend to use them much elsewhere. Fogoth in this build will work fine in Arena for me as well. So, it's efficient, basically. At the end of the day, that's all I really look for in this channel, as you guys know, is I try and maintain my account in an efficient manner and be able to farm everything and not have to do too many regears. So I'll put a little bit of music on, you can watch the rest of this run, and then I'll show you one other composition after this. So the last composition I want to show you guys is bringing in the infamous Geomancer. By far the fastest way to kill Bommal, but not necessarily the most consistent. Specifically because my 2 Geomancers are both built for Hydra. But in any case, let's jump into the run. I'll put the music on again and you can watch this extremely sketchy but extremely funny and quick run. So there you have it, 60 turns, new record for me. I think I could get that significantly lower if I actually tuned this team to go after a minimum turns approach. But you can see how Geomancer can completely change the ball game with Bommal if you want to get some kind of speed farming composition going. Much like in Nether Spider, the synergy between Geomancer and Vogoth is amazing. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this video has been helpful to you. Please like, comment and subscribe. Any feedback is always welcome, and I will continue to try and bring you content that will help you progress in the game. Until next time, bye for now.